How we doing, guys? It's the morning after the night before the England-Argentina semi-final. Um, I think in terms of the game, most people would see it in the same way. I think the first 60 minutes or so went more or less exactly how I thought it would. You know, two teams cancelling each other out. It was a bit of a bitty game, which was, I think, what Argentina wanted. Um, and I do think that England were in control, you know, although there wasn't a load of chances. I think England had like 7 touches in Argentina's box in the whole game compared to Argentina's 28 in the end. But up until that point, I think it was fairly even. I thought England were in control. Score a good goal. You know, I think it was nice to see winger to winger with Anthony Gordon's goal. But then the big shift was obviously from there. And as soon as you kind of go a goal up and then go defensive, both from mentality but also from a tactical point of view, you're always in danger of it going wrong, especially with 25 minutes to go and you've got, you know, the greatest player of all time on the other side of the pitch, and you're going to now put it or allow them to put the ball in areas where he's going to now become effective. And I just think it's really disappointing from a managerial point of view that as soon as you take that lead, you almost stop backing your team to go and win it. And I think at that point in the game, you bring on a bit more pace, and you have a bit more of a threat on the counter attack, and you stay on the front foot. You try and keep the press there, and it was there for the taking, which is the mentality of Premier League. You know, you don't see teams in England when you look at Champions Leagues, etc., where teams take that lead in that moment and then just sit off. If anything, they use the momentum of scoring to go and get another goal. And we didn't show that, but that's also a common theme with England teams in tournaments. But as soon as the manager brings on effectively 6 defenders, with that much time left, and you concede all the space and you concede the fact that you're going to allow Argentina to have chances and you're going to allow Messi to get on the ball, as soon as that happens, you're dead. You know, as soon as that first goal goes in, I think we've all seen teams in the past, you know, the momentum just swings, and the momentum's a huge thing in football. From a player's point of view, I don't think England could have asked any more of those players. You know, I think they were just perhaps set up wrong. And, you know, that's probably the biggest frustration, I think, amongst the country, because you've got a manager there that's been brought in to make these differences and ultimately has ended up doing the same thing. And I think deeper down, what we're seeing is a slight problem or a massive problem with English style of play. I think we shouldn't really compare to other nations. But then when you're a country that's got every resource you could ever want, you know, in terms of facilities, in terms of money, in terms of access to the world's best at everything, you know, all the preparation, everything that goes into producing, you know, a world-class team. You know, we've been developing players now in a certain way in England, you know, with the EPPP, for example, since that's come in for a long time. It's not like that's only been a 4-year project. That's been happening for many years now, and we're producing players the way that the England DNA wants to produce players. But yet, whether it's the manager, whether it's the players, when you get to these big moments, they can't handle the ball under pressure. And I think that was the biggest difference between, you know, in England compared to a Spain. Spain went 1-0 up against France, who everybody called the best team in the world going into the semi-finals. You know, everyone thought England-France would be a final, not the third, fourth place game. But Spain kind of proved that having a collective methodology where every player completely understands the way they're there to play. You know, they don't change that style of play for anybody. You know, if anything, they double down on that style of play, especially when they're playing the big games. And they manage the game with the ball. And that's because the players are very comfortable being with the ball. You know, they don't have to be the most athletic team. They don't have to have the tallest team. You know, they haven't got to have massive diversity in their squad. You know, it's, we play this way, we manage the ball, we own the ball, and we will create our chances through that. But the biggest thing in tournament football is we wear the opposition down. I keep hearing ex-players talk about how they've been in that position before, like England. You know, I think Gary Neville said it on his show around when he played in Portugal, and England had all these great defenders, and it was the same thing. They took the lead and then they just couldn't get out. And he said the reason they couldn't get out is because they were just zapped with energy. They had nothing left. Well, that's why the way that Spain play works at this stage of the tournament, because if you've got the ball, it's the opponents that are running. It's the opponents that are having to defend. What England do in continuous tournaments is when we take that lead, instead of managing the game with the ball, we let the opponent have the ball, and now we're just sitting in and defending, which means every time we get the ball, we just kick it back to them, and then they attack again. So that's the thing that has to change. You know, yes, the management, yes, the mentality of bringing on attacking players or going for the kill when we're on top, but also when you have to manage moments with the ball. And people think about defending as sitting in a low block and covering space and dealing with crosses. Defending for the very elite is having the ball. That's why if you look at every successful team in the last 20, 25 years, more or less, maybe barring one or two with the occasional freaks like Leicester, for example, you know, pretty much every sustainable, successful team has always been able to dominate the ball and own the ball, especially at key moments in the game when they want to manage it. So that's the biggest thing for me that England got wrong. And of course, the management with the setting the tone with the mentality once going 1-0 up. And it always comes back to then, what is England's DNA? We call it, you know, the FA call it England's DNA. It's a lot of bullet points and there's a lot of things on there that are buzzwords, you know, but actually, what does an England team look like? Yes, you can have the spirit, the togetherness, all of that kind of stuff. You might say you want to be really good on a counter-attack and pace. Okay, but then we've got to become much better at defending as a low block in order to do that. I feel like we're constantly in this position where we don't know whether we're a counter-attack team, whether we're a possession-based team, whether we're a low block team, you know, high-pressing team. You know, what are we? And then you appoint the manager to that, you know, and I don't think Tuchel backed up his words. He said in the last tournament, England were afraid to lose rather than, you know, ambitious to win, whatever the quote was that he said. He's gone and done exactly the same thing. So, you know, I think at this stage, you know, if England really want to become clear on our identity and be able to manage the game of the ball, I mean, you've got a certain Pep Guardiola who's out of a job, and I think it would be a perfect fit. I think he knows English football much better than Thomas Tuchel does. Let's face it, he played as a manager in England for 2 years. Pep's obviously been in England for 10 years.